Well, all right. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Hot Seat Podcast. It is your buddy CJ here, and tonight we're talking about all things cars, music, movies, and so much more. Guys, welcome back to all my subscribers. You know your buddy CJ appreciates each and every one of you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Give me a like and subscribe. Listen, guys, I told you we have a big announcement, and here it is. For the past year and a half or so, I've been really focused on cars and the automotive industry and automotive events and all the things that gearheads and car guys are into. And listen, we are expanding. A lot of suggestions from my followers and my listeners and my friends and my family that I should expand the podcast. And I've been thinking about it for quite some time as well, because I'll tell you what, if you're like me, you're into more than just cars. Now, I am a car guy. I'm a gearhead through and through. And that's not going to change. We're going to continue to have lots of gearhead and car guy content on this channel. But we're getting bigger and better. Always moving forward, guys. Come on. We're going to have more fun. We're going to expand it by talking about music. Listen, a lot of us are cross-addicted. If you're into cars, you're probably into music. Okay? That's what I found all these years. And God knows I'm a music junkie. Okay? I've also found that, like your buddy CJ, many of you are into films and cinematography and movies, okay? Across the decades, action movies, sci-fi movies, dramas, you name it, blockbusters. If you're into movies and you're into music and you're into cars and so much more, pop culture, having fun, listen, this is the place to be for all that real talk. We're going to keep it up. We're just going to keep having so much more fun. Guys, it also keeps it fresh for me. I love talking about cars, but listen, mixing it up can keep it fresh, keep it fun for all of us. So let's get right into it. That's the new announcement. That's the big news. And tonight, on that note, we are going to talk about the 50th anniversary of the greatest summer blockbuster film of all time, Jaws, the original summer blockbuster. Can you believe Jaws came out in 1975, so long ago, right? But stands the test of time. And what I did is, listen, I've seen that film easily a dozen times. I have seen it in the theater. I didn't see it during its initial run 50 years ago. Guys, I'm not that old. Come on. But I'll tell you what, I have seen it as it's been reintroduced and re-released into theaters, the original Jaws. If you haven't seen it on the big screen, I strongly recommend it. But listen, seeing it at the home theater and watching it at home, this is a compelling, engrossing film, one of my favorites, and watching it for the bazillionth time, or maybe at least the 13th or 14th time, maybe more, this evening, I got to tell you, what a great film. Let's get into it. Jaws, can you believe it? Originally released in theaters 50 years ago, 1975, the original summer blockbuster. And guys, this film stands the test of time. If you have not seen it, stop what you're doing after you watch this video and go watch Jaws. And I'm going to tell you 5 things to really look out for in this film that I think make it so great. Are you kidding me? Roy Scheider starring as Chief Brody. Robert Shaw in his incredible on-screen performance as Quint. And of course, a young Richard Dreyfuss as Hooper. The 3 main actors just really came together. What ultimately ended up being an action, suspense, summer blockbuster, but also had the elements of a buddy film combined with that ending, that final fight scene between the 3 stars on board the Orca against the monster Jaws, the killer great white shark. Unbelievable, mind-blowing, directed by Steven Spielberg. This film came out 50 years ago, guys, and I claim it's one of the greatest of all time in this genre. And listen, if you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it lately, it's summer 2025. You gotta watch Jaws. Did you know that at the time this film was released, 1975, Jaws was the highest grossing film of all time? And in addition to that, the film that eclipsed it, by the way, about 2 years later, was Star Wars. So gives you a feel for what the scale of this thing was. And I'd say the number one thing when I watched it this evening that struck me and I want to know what you guys think, is the absolute brutality of this film. That opening scene, I don't want to ruin it for you, but guys, in 50 years, if you haven't seen it, you got to go see it. So, spoiler alert, the opening scene when Jaws, the great white shark, attacks the teenage girl, it's just, it's awful. It is a brutal scene that I think you can only imagine, right? Young people and teenagers and maybe even families who went to see this film in 1975. Can you imagine that opening scene? There was nothing else like this in the theaters in 1975. It was just awful. And I think, you know, that shocking brutality, and that's not the only brutal scene. I mean, a teenage girl gets eaten by a shark, then a little boy gets eaten by a shark, then like a middle-aged dude gets eaten by a shark, and one of the stars, I won't tell you who, gets eaten by a shark with gruesome detail. Like the brutality of this film is a key element. And I want to just throw that out there. You know, the other thing to note about Jaws, I'd say, is the performances of the actors, right? Richard Dreyfuss as Hooper, Roy Scheider as Chief Brody, and Robert Shaw as Quint. Any one of them did a great job, okay, and really brought these characters to life with some depth and weight. But the three of them together, man against man, right? You had the academic, the scientist in Hooper, Richard Dreyfuss's character, you know, coupled with the straight man, the law enforcement guy, Chief Brody, Roy Scheider. And then you had Quint, who's the brute, right? The shark hunter. And, you know, just this beast of a man. So one of the compelling things about action films like this is when you get the group together that normally would not mix. And these various different character elements coming together to work off of each other with a bit of that conflict and that heat and that man versus man, so to speak, coming together for that group against the beast, man against nature. Are you kidding me? So the three of them coming together to fight the monster in Jaws, right? Also of I think interesting relevance here, not to get too literary, not to get too academic this evening, but how about the comparison between Jaws, particularly the character of Quint, played brilliantly by Robert Shaw, and Moby Dick, Captain Ahab in The White Whale, Captain Quint in Jaws, the great white shark. And listen, spoiler alert, Quint goes down with the ship. Quint goes down with Jaws, just like Captain Ahab did with Moby Dick, the white whale. Unbelievable. Mind equals blown. So we talked a bit about the brutality of this film, the acting performances. The other thing I want to talk about is the character development. Again, there was depth to these characters. Quint, when he reeks his nails on the chalkboard and the wall in that scene, okay? And he introduces himself, okay, at the town meeting to talk about this shark. And then we see the conflict between Brody and what he felt compelled to do to protect the town versus the pressure he was getting from that sneaky, shady mayor, okay? All of these things show you the depth of Chief Brody, okay? And you get bought into his relationship with his wife and his relationship with his kids and his relationship with the town. There's a depth there, people. We find out that Chief Brody has a past, has a history. Before he came to Amity, this New England beach town, this resort town, if you will, okay? He was from New York. And you know, all these things we can think, we can relate to Chief Brody as sort of this outsider to the Islanders and Amity, okay, the locals, versus Chief Brody and his family coming to the island as the police chief, as an outsider. Again, some history, some depth and weight to Chief Brody. And he's a man in conflict with himself, conflict with his co-stars, okay, and certainly conflict with Jaws, the monster great white shark, okay? Incredible performances. The other thing I'll say is the cinematography work from director Steven Spielberg. Are you kidding me? the shots of Chief Brody on the beach when the camera zooms in on him, the typewriter scene as Chief Brody is pecking away at the keys and typing shark as the source of this attack on this teenage girl. Just unbelievable, right? Simple cinematic techniques and methods from another era, but not easy. Okay? Not easy. The man was brilliant in this film. Spielberg and his team, massive kudos. You know, any of the shots in this film, even Chief Brody sitting in his house with the water in the background, just so compelling, right? So interesting. It's like there's this constant theme of the sea and the mystery and the fear associated with what's under the water. Don't go in the water, right? The monsters that lurking out there. And it's this constant like backbeat and backdrop for this film. Spielberg was brilliant. We got to talk about the soundtrack. The musical score by John Williams. Bum, 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 bum. Listen, that's what added to the suspense. Without the soundtrack that's so iconic, this film would hit different and not in a good way. That soundtrack was almost a character in this film. Okay? That soundtrack by John Williams supercharged, poured gasoline on the level of suspense in this film. Just unbelievable. The last thing I'll say is the practical effects. No CGI in Jaws, people. You have to appreciate that there was a mechanical shark used, the infamous Bruce, okay? And the production team, Spielberg and the special effects artists and the engineers and the technicians, they were muscling their way through these practical effects in the 1970s, okay? No computer graphics. They did use some stock footage, which I think is kind of cheesy, of some sharks, like some Jacques Cousteau footage, if you know who he is, the vintage documentarian, and just all that vintage footage of real sharks that didn't always match up with sort of the monstrous size of Jaws, which I think is kind of funny that you see in some of the scenes using the mechanical shark. You know, listen, it was a different time. Practical effects, no computer generated garbage in this film. And I think that's part of what gives it character. It certainly gave it character back then. And, you know, when I see a film, I don't want to see a video game. Okay? I don't want to see a bunch of computer generated graphics. For me, it's part of the experience that, again, pulls me in to know that the production team and the director and the technicians behind the scenes pulled this thing together that could interact with the cast during the scenes. There's something to be said for that versus the computer-generated video game cartoonish elements of a lot of the modern films. And that doesn't mean that these modern films can't be great, but something was lost over the past 50 years with the rise of computer-generated graphics. You know, you had a degradation, in my opinion, of that elemental, foundational character of practical effects coming out of Hollywood. I don't know. You guys tell me what you think. Let's talk about some of the greatest scenes from Jaws, the original Jaws, 1975. And there are a bunch of them. Okay. One of the greatest scenes from the original 1975 Jaws, I think, is when Quint, played brilliantly by actor Robert Shaw, is on the back of the boat and they're hunting for Jaws in the final battle sequence. And he's got his fishing rod there in this screen grab from the film. And click, click, he's got Jaws on the line and his eyes pivot, right? And he looks at the line and then bloop, you see the bubble in the water as the line starts to move. And Quint gets up and buckles himself he straps himself into his seat. The suspense, guys, the performance by Robert Shaw, coupled with Spielberg's brilliant cinematic work in this scene, contributes to the suspense. It sucks us in as viewers, as moviegoers. And listen, you know, no CGI could replicate this. This is all performance by Robert Shaw. This is all brilliant directing by Steven Spielberg. And of course, the cinematography and the camera work by the crew. 50 years ago, Jaws, 1975. Guys, one of my favorite scenes in this film. Tell me what you think. Guys, the original Jaws coming out in 1975, perhaps one of the greatest sequences in the film is that final battle sequence, which actually takes up about half of the film. It's about a 2-hour film, okay? And that final battle sequence is almost an hour, okay? So the first hour of the film is the setup, right? And all the drama and suspense leading up to the final battle between Roy Scheider as Chief Brody, Robert Shaw as Captain Quint, and of course, the amazing Richard Dreyfuss, a very young Richard Dreyfuss as Hooper, on board the Orca, battling with Jaws. And I'll tell you, the infamous line, "You're gonna need a bigger boat." Are you kidding me? Just a iconic, legendary sequence, setting the template for the summer blockbuster, setting the template for action and suspense films. 3 guys from different worlds coming together, teaming up to battle the monster, the great white shark, Jaws. 3 brilliant performances by Shaw, Scheider, and Dreyfuss. And of course, the brilliant cinematic work, director Steven Spielberg, pulling all this together. Practical effects. Guys, if you haven't seen Jaws, I gotta say, or if you haven't seen it lately, 50 years since the original theatrical release, one of the greats. Jaws, 1975. Guys, let's keep going. Another key element of this film, and I think just another example of character development and acting performance, Robert Shaw. He stole the show from me and is really my favorite character in this film. You guys tell me if you feel the same. But on board the Orca, all right, when Quint is talking about his experience when he was in the Navy, World War II, on board the Indianapolis, which was sunk by the Japanese, and how that kind of got him into the world of, his history of the shark hunter. He was one of the survivors, and so many of his naval colleagues went down and were attacked by sharks, okay, and met a bitter end. Again, if he had just given his soliloquy in that scene and mailed it in, I don't think we'd be talking about that scene 50 years later. Robert Shaw steals this movie with his performance in that scene and other scenes. The guy just, he went to a dark place for this character and he crushed it in a very powerful and moving soliloquy about his experience, okay, on board the Indianapolis and when the ship was sunk. And in the context of that final battle sequence, it just, again, for me, that this type of performance is what pulls me in. It's not enough to just be a monster movie. And, I will say this, compared to like King Kong, when King Kong came out in 1976, go back and watch that after you watch Jaws, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. King Kong had a monster in it, a giant ape instead of a giant shark. And you had some star power in that, a young Jessica Lange, Jeff Bridges, right? And others. But you didn't have the acting performances that you had in Jaws, okay? You didn't have that character development to suck you in. I'm not saying King Kong was a bad film, because I enjoy that as well, okay? I think it's iconic from that era of the disaster movie, the blockbuster, the action movie from the 70s. It's still a fun film, King Kong, and maybe I got to do an episode on that. But it's interesting to compare that to Jaws, because what's the difference? The difference is the directing, the acting performance, the character development, and of course the suspense. Other than that, listen, there's cool special effects, practical effects. There's a giant ape. That's cool. Compare that to the giant shark in Jaws, but Jaws is the better film, hands down. And guys, listen, Jaws, with its tropes, the blockbuster tropes of the catastrophe, the escapism, the monster element, the final battle, this team of buddies and co-heroes coming together from different worlds to fight the monster, and it's all there right in front of us. Jaws, 1975. Let's celebrate it. If you haven't seen it lately, go check it out. But most importantly, guys, you tell me, did I miss anything? Do you see Jaws as the greatest summer blockbuster of all time? Do you see it as, this dramatic suspense icon? Or did I miss something? You tell me. Are there other films that you think rank higher? Has it stood the test of time? Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoy the direction the channel's going. We're branching out. We're getting more diverse, having more fun than human beings should be allowed to have together. Thank you so much. Give me those comments. Give me a like and subscribe. Guys, until I see you on the next one, be good, be safe, and peace.